we can't just examine that in a vacuum and pretend that Mulvaney's portrayal of being a transgender individual is not potentially harmful to already confused minors to go in a life-altering direction that they may regret later. Let's move on to the culture corner. And moving from a very happy in the division bring us together kind of topic, we have a rather contentious one, which from both sides could be plausibly argued is divisive. But David and I are just going to kind of muddle through this conversation, trying to figure out where exactly we stand on it, because we can see strong arguments from both sides. And what we're talking about today, we're not going to play the roughly 2-minute quote for you here in this episode, but we'll link to it from his Twitter, and you can watch it yourself to get it in his own words. But the conservative commentator Matt Walsh, who really exploded into the popular zeitgeist through his documentary of last year, a couple years called "What Is a Woman," where he went around the world trying to figure out what is a woman. And he is a popularizer, he is a popular individual that stands opposite what we will call, for lack of a better term,
very
transgender narrative or agenda. The
super conservative.
The pushing, yes, of transgenderism all the way to its extremes, as David and I have discussed before, all the way down to, minor children getting irreversible medical procedures and things like that. So Matt Walsh was responding to, in this clip that you'll see in the show notes or the description, was responding to a TikTok from Dylan Mulvaney. And for those of you who don't know who Dylan Mulvaney is, that is a male to female transgender individual who, I believe, at what prompted Mulvaney's TikTok that Walsh was responding to, was he had recently gone through plastic surgery, facial feminization. I don't know what exactly that entailed, maybe like bringing the jawline in, shaving the Adam's apple, things like that, just to make himself more feminine appearing. And the TikTok, which I have seen on other platforms, is him saying, oh, like, this is the most feminine I've ever looked, and I feel like I can pass for a female, and I feel so beautiful, and all of this kind of stuff. He was very happy with the outcome of his surgery. And by the way, I just want to get out in front of this. I am saying he and him and all this kind of stuff, not in sort of any intentionally insulting way. I know that that's what it's going to be called anyway. I don't really care. I am calling reality for what it is, that biological males are males and biological females are females.
Oh,
so I'm not intentionally
the podcast
calling him and he and all this kind of stuff to be gratuitously rude to Mr. Mulvaney. I'm just calling reality for what it is, right? So let's just set that aside for a second. Anyway, Walsh he took it personal, David. Would you say? Is that the direction he took his critique of Mulvaney?
He's been fighting this fight for so long that I don't think that he's become a hammer. And the whole world looks like a nail when you're a hammer. And I don't think that he's been in it so long that he can't assuage himself from having a debate with somebody who's a professor at some fucking university espousing this thing that he's attached to, that he can't define what a woman is, but a woman is a woman, and you can say that you're a woman. Anyway, I digress. My point is that he might have seen a little red. He might just see red whenever he sees something like this. So he did go a little hard. He went really hard, and we'll discuss the intricacies about this too afterwards. But I also have one opinion before we get into the nuts and bolts of this. When you put, just as a disclaimer to anybody watching or listening, when you put your opinions or your thoughts or a picture or whatever the fuck you put on the internet, you are signing an unsignable, an agreed upon contract. There's no contract to sign, but it's a handshake. You're putting yourself out there into the ether, and you are not bound by law to only have positive feedback given back to you.
Right.
You are putting yourself out there, and people will be able to look at you and espouse their opinion. And guess what? The interwebs can be pretty fucking dark. So I doubt this is even the worst thing that was his rant alone. It might have been child's play to what some other people might have said in the comment section to what that is. So all that being said, if you don't want to have a media backlash over something you post, don't post it. If you have even the inkling that says, does somebody really need to see that I'm drinking a fucking Starbucks that everyone else drinks? Do I really need to take a picture of this? Just that one moment of hesitation will save you a lot of heartache down the road. I can tell you that much right now. You should know, take it from us. We get plenty of comments anyway.
So I think we can say about this whole topic as abstractly as possible that I think everybody would agree, both the pro Matt Walsh side and the anti Matt Walsh side, is that he definitely took his critique of Mulvaney personal. Again, Walsh is kind of out there speaking out against the transgender movement agenda, whatever you want to call it, transgenderism. He's speaking out of it largely as a movement in abstract terms, but in this instance, he made it personal. Basically saying, you know, Mulvaney, you do not pass as a female. You will never be a female. You have taken all of the best parts of masculinity away from yourself, but you have acquired none of the best parts of femininity to yourself. That kind of thing. Yeah, he went personal with it. Now, I want to step aside from the left versus right paradigm a little bit, in the sense that I'm not going to say that that was good or bad or whatever, but there is a bit of a debate brewing in more conservative libertarian circles about whether Matt Walsh's tactics were the best idea. Because let's be honest, since David and I have been talking about all the way since episode 3, the cultural hegemony lies strongly in the grip of the left, right? They own all of the established institution. They own most of the mass media. They own the higher intellectual spheres in most of major universities, politically, socially, culturally, everything. I think most people would agree that up to this point, up until very recently, when the tide has maybe shifted a little bit, that the culture wars are being substantially won in many regards by the left. So the question is, for libertarians and conservatives that want to kind of break through that, if not to balance the playing field, win the culture wars or whatever it may be, whatever an individual's definition of that is that tactics matter and how you reach out to other people matter. And that is largely the critique that Walsh has been getting from libertarians and conservatives. Been saying that, you know, you're being gratuitously mean to Mulvaney and you're making it personal, and this is why conservatives lose the culture war. This is not very good for outreach, right? You're not going to bring in people who don't already agree with you, things like that. And although I think that those critiques are valid in some regards, there is something to be said for the other side. And so David and I are just going to do our best to present both sides of the argument and let you, the viewer listener, decide what you think about the discussion.
So without further ado, what's your first take on it? Just gut.
So the first thing that I'll say is that people are accusing Matt Walsh of being excessively angry for no reason. Like he came across as angry and mean. And what I will say is that saying that to a particular conservative or libertarian is a little bit of gaslighting, right? Because we have to remember that when the left disagrees with us on anything, right? Even if you don't go as far as David and I and say that all taxation is theft, and you just say, I think we should lower the marginal tax rate by about 0.5%, you know, you're called a racist, a Nazi, you hate minorities, you want to destroy social welfare, you want to do all this kind of stuff, right? They go very overboard against people who disagree with them. So if you're in Matt Walsh's or any conservative libertarian position, and you've spent years or decades being called a bigot, you know, obviously racism wouldn't play into transgenderism, Nazi, fascist.
Yeah.
So,
communist is a good thing.
Yeah. You're being called all of these bad things simply for saying a biological man is a man and a biological female is a woman.
Fucking doo-doo.
how long can you expect somebody to be called the worst thing in the world, right? The worst thing you can think of to call somebody is a fascist Nazi bigot, before they do respond with a little bit of anger.
If you call somebody a monster long enough, they're going to become a monster.
Take on monster characteristics. So in that route, why is it that the conservative, libertarian, right, whatever you want to call it, why is it that they always have to take the high road when the left never does? So I think it's a little bit short-sighted. It's a little unfair for conservative, libertarian people that are critical of Walsh's tactics here to say that, you should always take the high road when, again, years and years and years of treating people on the other side of the aisle with kid gloves has resulted in nothing but us continued to be ostracized and outcast and be called the worst people alive because we disagree with them. So, that's where I'll start it.
Well, again, to call it a crusade is to maybe overamp it a little bit, but he has been on slightly a crusade for a while. And another thing that kind of just came across my mind is he might have been this virulent in his opinion and his statements because he was thinking about Mulvaney has a large following, right?
Yeah.
So he's probably thinking about all the followers. So he's like, he's probably shitting all over this person because he doesn't want the followers to follow this person because they're following him down, in his opinion, the wrong track. Now, that being said, I do agree with what he's saying, and I feel like I agree with his position in general, but maybe not on this, but I feel like this is just like that one, everybody's been on a cart or a family trip that, so he's touching me, I'm not touching you, he's touching me, I'm not touching you, he's touching me, I'm not touching, like, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to drive. Every dad has that moment in a vacation, everybody in the car just kind of goes like this. And then it's really quiet for the next 5 minutes. I think Matt Walsh just had one of those moments. Like, you can only, like Dane was saying, like, you can only hear that you're a Nazi, a bigot, a fascist, or rapist was probably thrown in there somewhere, until you just lose your shit and like have just like a little letting off some steam moment. And I feel like, unfortunately for Mulvaney, Mulvaney's a comedian. But he just so happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, saying the wrong thing. That being said, on the con for me, I feel like exactly what I was just hedging towards is that he went very individualistic with this particular attack. And that I don't think, obviously, I have my own opinions on the subject that we won't breach because we're trying to keep this to, a shorter time period that wouldn't take 5 hours to decompress. But I just think it was wrong place, wrong time, and he just got caught up in the maelstrom.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into, I guess, the next arguments from both sides is on a very surface level, right? This is I wouldn't even call it a trope. It applies in many situations, but not universally, is the libertarian response of let consenting adults do whatever they want. When we've talked about the transgender agenda in the previous times, we've always said, yeah, if you're an adult, make whatever decision you want, quit forcing it on children. And although that has a superficial validity to it in this case, this stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? First of all, this isn't punching down from Walsh to Mulvaney. I don't know the exact numbers of their followers on different platforms, but Mulvaney is big. This isn't some like struggling teenager, with gender dysphoria and Matt Walsh is punching down at this person. Like, Mulvaney's platform is big. His influence is massive, and especially among young children. So to say simply and leave it at that let consenting adults do whatever they want, isn't really going to be the beginning and end of the discussion, because there are children involved in this. And, one thing to say is, if you are a child struggling with complex feelings about your gender and all that kind of stuff,
who hasn't?
And you are always presented in popular culture with someone like Mulvaney and the people that cheer him on, is that, hey, if you switch your gender, it's going to be this great thing and only happy outcomes, and all of your problems will be fixed by doing this, right? And the other side, the objectors to it, always only ever say, let consenting adults do whatever they want, and they don't counterbalance the scales by getting maybe a little mean with it, like Walsh did, and say, no, this is bad, this isn't good, this is da 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 da. And you don't get the very strong popular opinion and the very strong negative opinion. Well, then what are kids going to be left to do? If you just have really strong popular opinion and then just neutral on the other side, you might tend to go towards the strong popular opinion. And let's be honest, like, kids are impressionable. So there's that. But to David's point about Mulvaney being an individual, this is probably the strongest critique for me of him, is because we always talked about don't collectivize people. Human beings are individuals. They're not monolithic groups that you can just lump together and persecute. That's how atrocities happen. And so even if we have our misgivings about the transgender agenda, right, of forcing this sort of ideology on children, that's not, in my view, or at least not what I've seen, that's not what Mulvaney does. He talks about his own experience. He's a very happy, bubbly personality who's always nice to everybody he comes into contact with. And so he does look like a little bit of a victim because he's not a mean person, whereas in this case, Walsh may have been. But again, we can't just examine that in a vacuum and pretend that Mulvaney's portrayal of being a transgender individual is not potentially harmful to already confused minors to go in a life-altering direction that they may regret later. And so in that regard, although we shouldn't collectivize Mulvaney with the rest of the group that maybe does want to force transgenderism down our throat, you know, there's some gray area in there, which I think Walsh is operating in.
Well, again, to not collectivize, throw Matt Walsh in there too. Like, not all people that share Matt Walsh's view on this subject have it so virulently. So to say that, like, oh, well, that's because that's what they're doing. They're trying to get a reaction. They were like, they're going to hold this. That's what they all think. That's how mean they all are. That's why we need to have freedom. And that's why we need to have laws in place so that they can't hit us with this hate. It's like, it's not hate. He lost his cool. He yelled at you. Again, to go back to the dad analogy, he just lost his cool for a second. He doesn't hate, he still loves everyone in the car. He just fucking snapped. So again, grievances on both sides. We need a little margin for error for Matt Walsh because he's been doing it for a while. And we need a little margin for error for Mulvaney because he does have an influence on these, like you were saying, impressionable kids. And again, to bring it back to the followers thing, like, there's a lot. If his whole thing, he's had testimony upon testimony of, like, he's calls it child mutilation to have these surgeries, like hormone blockers and all this stuff for children. He feels like he's standing up for children, and when he sees something like this and just sees red, the TikTok's predominantly. Do you know a lot of 70-year-olds that are flipping through TikTok nowadays?
Not that many.
And it's pretty.
It's for the younger crowd.
It's for the younger crowd. So this was a TikTok, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, that Walsh was responding.
So that creates a perfect little fucking Molotov cocktail for Matt Walsh to just blow his top off. So he thinks he's standing up for kids while he's attacking. How old is Mulvaney? Like, probably like 20-ish. She didn't look that old. Or she or he.
Late 20s, early 30s, maybe.
Like,
I'm not sure.
So, like, I don't know. That was an adult telling possibly other adults glamorizing
for
making
children,
it look something. And that, again, there were faux pas committed on both sides from both sides' perspectives. And I think it's a teachable moment, just like most fuck ups are. Most fuck ups are teachable moments. And I think we need to just cool it for a second and just, like Dane was saying, look at both sides and say, hey, this is a teachable moment. Let's move on from this and let's figure out how to have a conversation from here on out.
Well, and the last thing that I'll leave you, viewer, listener, with is just some food for thought, because when I hear conservatives, libertarians be excessively apologetic about having strong opinions on contentious topics, right? I would just caution them to say, examine the other side and see how cautious or apologetic the other side is about strong opinions on those topics. Because the same people that the conservatives and libertarians are attacking Walsh for poor strategy, poor tactics in terms of being mean to an individual. Those same people that are urging tolerance for the other side need to
have zero tolerance.
Need to take a step back and examine, does the other side ever give you any tolerance? And I understand there is the whole turn the other cheek and take, when they go low, we go high and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with that. And I'm fine. And, you know, to each his own in terms of applying that particular strategy. But don't get it twisted that even if Mulvaney would not personally be lining you up against a wall or putting you on train cars if they got the complete political power that they wanted, you know, because you had a difference of opinion with them, there are strong pushes from that side in that direction, right? It's a very short step. David and I talk about dehumanizing on a lot of topics all the time. It's a very short step from dehumanizing. Every time they call us Nazis, fascists, bigots, blah, 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 for simply saying that a biological man is a man and always will be a man, and a biological female is a woman and always will be a woman, for stating that simple reality, it is a very short step from dehumanizing us as racist, Nazis, fascists, bigots, blah, 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 to eventually targeting us for prosecution themselves. So we can't be so over the top in terms of being gracious and tolerant to their side and never having a negative word to say on any of the topics ever until we're finally actually sitting on the train car and thinking, maybe we should have pushed back a little bit more. You know, so again, that's not me, you know, taking Walsh's side 100%. I can see the strong arguments from both sides. Maybe it didn't make sense strategically. Maybe it's not going to outreach to the vast expanses in the middle that aren't super hardcore left. Maybe it's not going to get everybody to come to our side of the ledger. Fine. But it's also not a universally dark, evil, terrible thing that he did. And it's completely unprovoked and without any sort of excuse at all. There is a lot of history here with the left targeting us for all kinds of persecution simply because we disagree with them. So I would just hesitate a little bit more before you throw out somebody from your own side when you consider what exactly the other side thinks of you, even if you're trying to play nice in this one instance.
Well, it's like what we always say. You can appreciate a snake because it'll let you know it's a snake, but a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? That's a trickier test to follow.